I'm talking to the Solomonic magicians, people who are working with some sort of grimoire-based magic, typically where you're conjuring a spirit into a scrying medium, right? Or whether you're just scrying it in a very spiritual ways to see whether you're seeing the manifestation of a being with your spiritual side. My beliefs, my opinions about this matter, and I am very opinionated, believe it or not, have to do with my involvement with evidential mediumship, right? And what I learned doing evidential mediumship, studying evidential mediumship for over many years with some really distinguished evidential mediums, and how I found that dovetailed and informed my Solomonic practice. And if you don't know what evidential mediumship is a form of active mediumship where a medium is, trying to get a sitter in touch and provide evidence of the survival of a departed loved one, someone that they knew, a relative or a friend that's passed over, and there is an exchange that happens between the magician and the medium and the sitter, right? Evidential mediumship does not happen in a vacuum. Evidential mediumship is an exchange between a medium and a sitter. A medium will be tuning in, receiving information from that spiritual being, from that discarnate soul, that spirit person, and he will be relaying this information and confirming that information with the sitter. He will be getting chunks of information like, oh, I have a lady in her 60s, I feel like she passed over from lung cancer. And then the sitter will say, oh yeah, the sitter will either confirm or deny that they have someone who's passed over in that with some of those characteristics, right? That there will be an exchange, so there will be a confirmation. No more information than that will be given, and then the medium will build on that. There will be the medium will then remain in contact with that discarnate being, get more information, give the information. The sitter will confirm or deny it, and so a picture is built up. It's a cyclical process where this connection is refined, right? And so there is an opportunity to confirm the information or deny it. And even the most incredible medium, no matter how great they are, Gordon Higginson, doesn't matter who they were, they will get some no's. There will be some bits of information that will be incorrect, not because the mediumship is bullshit and there is no spirit being, but because the medium might be misunderstanding what they receive. And that is in fact a very powerful and helpful part of the process, because usually when the sitter says no to any given piece of information, the medium doesn't just go, oh, that's wrong, and gives up. He will return back to that spirit being and he will try and refine what that information is, and usually it will be shifted in such a way that he will be able to clarify what he meant, and it then eventually will be, we'll understand what is meant by that. So he might say, oh, I understand that they were, this person was a pilot, for example. And the sitter will say, no, they were not a pilot. And you will go, blah, 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 back in touch with the spiritual being, and you might say, oh, but this person spent a lot of time doing spent a lot of time in the air. They flew a lot. They were a frequent traveler. And then the sitter will go, oh yes, of course, they were going on vacations once a month or once a week, whatever the case may be. So the information was incorrect, but there was something there that needed to be clarified and kind of fine-tuned. So this is an iterative process, and that happens between a sitter and a medium and the spirit, right? And this iterative process is in fact key to developing mediumship. When you are developing your mediumship as a developing medium, and you're practicing with other medium, doing thousands and thousands of sittings, I mean thousands of sittings, many, many, many sittings. I've done a lot of practice sittings with other mediums, going to Arthur College, being part of development circles, working one-to-one with other mediums. Over many years, you just practice and you practice and you practice. And what you discover with this iterative process, where you have someone there who can either confirm or deny what you are receiving, is in fact how your gift functions. Without having that direct feedback of how your gift functions, how the subtlety, what the nuance is of when you are in fact in communicating with a spirit entity, and what that feels like, is so subtle, it's so fleeting, it's so imperceptibly light and nuanced, that it takes a lot of practice and a lot of experience with someone who is there, who is objective, who can give a yes or a no, or I don't understand if I don't get what you're saying. And this iterative process, in fact, teaches you, it allows you to understand how spirit communications works. Spirit communications work because there is someone who can verify what you're saying. And this is an important missing piece of the puzzle with scrying. When you're doing scrying, and especially if you're a new magician, there is no one there to say yes or no, or I don't know, to the information that you're receiving from that spirit being, right? And all you have is this vacuum that you're now working in. And I find it very interesting that historically the great magicians, Dee and many others, were working with mediums. They were working with speculatrixes or seers, often women. And the magician wasn't necessarily given that the magician would also be a competent scryer, a competent clairvoyant. John Dee knew he wasn't a competent clairvoyant, so he found Edward Kelly, and they had this relationship over a period of time. Even though by all accounts Edward Kelly was a bit of a dodgy character, he apparently was an excellent clairvoyant, and John Dee knew this. So there was this, firstly, this recognition that not every magician is a competent clairvoyant, and I think this distinction is lost on a lot of magicians. They think because you have the kit and you do all the conjuration and you are a competent magician, that you somehow will have the competence to discern these subtle impulses from the spiritual realm. And that's just not the case. It may not be the case. It may be that you need to either develop your clairvoyance in a structured way, or that you need to work with a clairvoyant in order to get that gift, right? And then of course, in the case of Dee and Kelly, for example, there would be something akin, something similar to the iterative process of evidential mediumship, insofar as Dee and Kelly would be working together, or the magician and the scryer would be working together. There would be, in other words, someone there who could be verifying something and acting in a sort of a more objective way, assessing this information in an objective way. Then there's this thing that I noticed conjuring up spirits, and this is a problem that I ran into a lot, and it was simply this. If the rite worked out well, and I had the spirit being there, I would go into an incredible trance and of just a visionary experience with this being, that was so overwhelming and intense that, yes, here is this being, and I'm flooded with the presence of this being, seeing every detail and being just radiated with the force of this presence of this being. That the intensity of that trance would basically knock down any preconceived agenda I might have had for that rite. I might have had an idea that I wanted to ask this and this and this question and do this and this and have this. I would have had this whole agenda, what my objective was for this rite. But the intensity of that clairvoyant trance was such that I became incapacitated. I would just kind of be drooling. I'd go, it would be, I would look back at the recording of that, listen back at the recording of that experience, or at the end try to journal that, and it would be like 2 sentences of information, because basically I needed someone in the driving seat. I needed a magician in the driving seat to kind of steer what was going on. It would have been easier for me to be the scryer for another magician, rather than trying to do this multitask, these 2 things, which are almost 2 different modes. That's a challenge that I felt, right? Spirit perception, scrying, spirit communication is extremely subtle. It's a very, very nuanced, iterative process. It's not, and lastly, it does not necessarily result in a full-blown visionary kind of apparition. A lot of spirit communication is much more subtle than that. It is a flow of kinesthetic or auditory information that is not necessarily linguistic. It can be a flow of emotional impulses, a sense of knowing certain things. And it's really in those subtleties that a lot more profound information is often communicated. And it's the kind of thing that you only learn from having that tested, having that experience tested. So I guess the moral of my whole rant is that, if one of the best developmental tools for spirit work, for spirit communication, I think, is in fact evidential mediumship. Practicing doing mediumistic readings for people with the dead, and having someone there who can say yes, no, or I don't understand what the hell you're talking about to the information that you're receiving. That is an extremely powerful experience, and it's experience that I try to give all my clients in the 3 Keys program. One of the components of the 3 Keys is working with the dead and becoming aware of the spiritual framework, the spiritual guides that work with you in that realm. And I try to give all my clients a taste of that kind of work so that they can get a sense of the benefit that could have. This is something that I want to bring up. The value that evidential mediumship might have for Solomonic magic. Shall we say, I think the overestimation of the imagination that really is prevailing in the discipline. I think because of the emphasis on path working, the emphasis on working through the imaginative faculty that we see after the Victorian period, that frankly I wonder if a lot of people aren't fooling themselves.